Hi everyone, it's William with the 1921 Diary Series, and it's a noisy day here today, I'm sorry to say. We had the garbage truck when I was doing the 1906 diary entry, and now we have a power tool of some kind for the 1921 diary entry, so yeah, c'est la vie, I guess. At least today I'm doing it earlier, so I don't have the bright sunlight behind me as the sun goes lower. The direction behind me is west, as you've probably already figured out. It's not important, but wow, yeah, really interesting stuff. In this will be the part 5 of the diary entry of January 31st, 1921. And yesterday we talked about Dimitri's his decision to form his own little group, his own little subgroup of the Russian Assembly, so-called, that has been formed by Trepov. It's meeting every Friday in a private room in a restaurant to strategize about returning monarchy to Russia. So Dmitri has formed his own little subgroup, which is basically an intelligence gathering group. He calls it an information bureau, but in modern parlance, I think you would call it, yeah, an intelligence bureau, with the aim of gathering information, gathering intelligence from various sources, both there in France and abroad. So he told us in the diary entry of yesterday that he was going to be recruiting people to be in this subgroup. And now today he's going to give us the names of these initial people, and all but one of them are people that we already know. And so I thought I might have to, just skimming this yesterday, I thought I might have to do some additional research today on some new people coming into the group, but there's only one new person coming into the group. So that was helpful, although a little bit boring is not the right word, but it would have been interesting to see who is coming into the group. Yeah, he's keeping it small. It is, after all, a subgroup, and the assembly itself is small enough to meet in a private room at a restaurant. So, and I should add that this is very typical of him. Another interesting way that he organizes his diaries is when he does these long entries to always start with political information and then to turn to personal information. All right, so let's dive in. Events themselves have helped me with this undertaking, because Pete Polovtsov, given that he is in constant contact with the French, heard a great deal, or has heard a great deal, from that direction, from that source. General Gulevich is constantly seeing the people coming from Constantinople, Siberia, and even from Soviet. General Golevsky is working almost exclusively on extracting information about Russia and the Red Army. All these people, though of course they shared their impressions with each other, were, as real Russians, sorry, I'm flubbing this, though of course as real Russians they shared their impressions with each other, were nonetheless working on their own. And I had the idea of simply bringing them together with General Gulevich as the head. The latter is frightfully happy about it and came to thank me for my trust in him. Officially, this little group is working as part of the Russian Assembly, but unofficially, these people, no matter how comical it may sound, make up my own staff. At Golevsky's request, I am including Dolgoruki in the group. He's in contact with Germany. Okay, so I don't know about Dolgoruki, but all the other men, Polovtsov, Gulevich, and Galeevsky, are generals. So Dmitri is going in a military direction with this. They all outrank him by far because he left the Russian army with the rank of captain. And these other fellows are all generals. And Dolgoruki may or may not be a general, but I think in all likelihood there are two Dolgorukis in my notes. One, Sergei Alexandrovich, some of you are already familiar with because he was attached to the household of Maria Fyodorovna, and he may have been a general, I don't know, but he was attached very strongly to her. And the other one is that therefore probably the more likely. The other man who appears in Dmitri's diaries is Prince Pyotr Alexandrovich Dolgoruki, and he, like Dmitri, held the rank of captain in the Horse Guards. And since he wasn't a general, there's not really much about him online, and so he's a bit of a mystery to me. But I'm assuming that that is the Dolgoruki that we're talking about. And that, though he was not one of the emigres who had settled in Germany, he is, as Dmitri puts it, in contact with Germany. So let's talk about Dmitri himself. He knows that some people would just laugh at this, but he tells us that unofficially he's considering this little group of men to be his own staff. So an emperor would have a staff, the commander-in-chief of an army would have a staff, and I don't know that a Grand Duke would usually have a staff. He would certainly have adjutants, but this seems to me to be pointing in the direction of Dmitri's serious belief that he will be at some point and in some way, rather whether as an emperor or a constitutional monarch or what have you, that he will have a staff, a military staff, and these men are going to have this function for him in advance of that role being attained. So he's being a little disingenuous with the Russian assembly. We know he doesn't, I won't say he doesn't respect them, but we know he thinks that they're not really constructively working towards changing things in Russia because they are so oriented to the way things were done by the old regime. So this little group of his is officially, as he puts it, a subgroup of the Russian assembly, but they probably know, or if not, he at least considers them to be his staff, and I'm sure they know. And they're all people who have already been coming to see him before the formation by Trepov of the Russian Assembly. Gulevich and Galeevsky and Pete Polovtsov have been, Pete has been really with him on a daily basis, and the two generals, Gulevich and Galeevsky, have been coming very often in the mornings. So we talked about them before, but I think it will be valuable to say, to sort of brush up on who they were. So Galeevsky was a military attaché, the Russian military attaché to Washington, D.C. during the First World War. So that's interesting, and he seems to have been a fairly moderate person. He was a staunch monarchist, but he wasn't an extremist. I think he was on the same wavelength as Dmitri, who also was not at all an extremist. And Galeevsky ended up being imprisoned by the Nazis during the Second World War. He survived that, And let's see, I don't know why they arrested him, but yeah, I don't know. Anyway, they obviously considered him some kind of threat or annoyance. Now, Gulevich had been the chief of staff in, let's see, he had been the chief of staff before the war to the head of the Guards and St. Military. I keep flubbing things today. The Guards and St. Petersburg Military District, the main and most important military district in Russia, which was headed by no other than Grand Duke Nikolai Nikolaevich. So he had been Nikolai Nikolaevich's chief of staff. And then later on, during the Civil War, I should say, he was attached to one of the big generals that were leading the White Army against the Reds, Yudenich. So Yudenich was one of the first to be eliminated in the sense of not being successful and being asked to step down from that post. And he went with, so Gulevich went with Yudenich to Finland, and then in 1919, Gulevich was actually running the Russian Red Cross in Finland, and he arrived in France in 1920, and he, unlike Golevsky, would welcome the German invasion of Russia in 1940, was it 1941 or the end of it was 1941, and he welcomed that. And so at that was something that really divided the emigres at that time. The fact that some of them saw the German invasion of Russia as a solution to the Bolshevik problem, to the communist problem, and others, among them Dmitri, were absolutely horrified by it and were of the mind that no matter what the government is like in Russia, Russia is still Russia, and we still support it. It's our motherland, and we don't want any foreigners invading. So yeah, that was a real point of dispute that divided the emigre community in Europe as a whole. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. And so why are these particular men valuable to this intelligence, this little intelligence agency / Dmitri's own staff? Well, Pete Polovtsov has been in constant contact with the French, Dmitri tells us. And I don't know in what capacity. I need to do some brushing up on Pete Polovtsov and figure out what he was doing with the French. Okay, General Gulevich. This one, is actually, to me, the most interesting. Well, I shouldn't say that. They're all interesting. But General Gulevich is in contact with the people who are now arriving in France and other Western European countries from Constantinople and Siberia. So the Civil War the white forces having collapsed and been evacuated, those, as many as they possibly could, they were getting out of the country, and a lot of them were ending up in Constantinople. So there were lots and lots and lots of Russian refugees there, including a lot of them who were single men and who were soldiers. And so that was, that was a big problem at that time for Turkey and for Constantinople. And some of them were then sent to Yugoslavia. It was a big mess, but you had them constantly trickling in from Constantinople and also from Siberia, where Kolchak's forces had been concentrated. And I'm sure they did have a great deal of very interesting information, especially the ones in Constantinople, because they had only recently been evacuated from the Crimea. And so they would have had really first-hand information about what was going on in the fight against the Red Army and in the villages and that sort of thing. Okay, and then we're told that Gulevich even has some information and coming in from Sovdep. So he has a man on the inside, or that's the implication anyway. So definitely a valuable person to join the team. Golevsky, it's a bit more vague. He is working almost exclusively on the extraction of information about Russia and the Red Army. So whom is he extracting it from, and what are his connections? This Dmitri doesn't tell us. So possibly he doesn't even know, but he knows that this is with what Golievsky is working on. And next we have Dolgoruki, and he is the one who has contacts in Germany, whether with, maybe refugees there, because a lot of these soldiers who had been evacuated from Russia did end up in Germany, as well as in Yugoslavia and Constantinople. So maybe with them, I don't know, maybe with some actual Germans who there had also been a large German contingent in Soviet Russia during the Civil War period. But anyway, it sounds like a pretty promising start as far as what each of these people individually can bring to this information gathering, this intelligence gathering group. And it seems like a very good start. But let's see, there was something, I'm going to give up on doing a fluent video today, because both in this and the one for the 6th, I've just been a little muddle-headed. There was something else I wanted to say about it. Well, so Dmitri is not seeing himself as the spy master, so to speak. He is appointing Gulevich to be the head of this group. And Gulevich is so happy about it that he's come personally to thank Dmitri. And he's really happy to be doing it. So maybe we'll find out later how these people are supposed to function as Dmitri's staff. But I will, compliment him on the fact that he's put 2 and 2 together. All of these people have individually visited him, and so he's learned about what their individual activities are. And so he's quite right to see, well, it would be much more effective if they were working together. They've been in contact with each other on an informal basis and sharing impressions, but the most efficient way to go forward is to bring them together in one group. And then Dmitri himself is the one who will be reporting to the Russian Assembly on the Friday evening gatherings. Okay, so that's it for that. I apologize again for my muddle-headedness, and we will be talking more about the functioning of this group in the next section of the diary entries. We're not quite to the personal section yet, but I hope you're enjoying this section as much as I am, and are as interested as I am in seeing its further development. All right, see you next time.